When studying film critique, there is a term called coding. Coding is defined as a text subtext, or the meaning underneath the audio/visual that is being shown to the audience. In Lindsay Ellis's great video, contrasting Independence Day with the War of the Worlds, she talks about how in media, when there are aliens, they are never just aliens. The study of film and how it relates to post-World War II Japan is typically relegated to kaiju films like Godzilla and how they are an allegory for the destructive capabilities of nuclear energy. Therefore, the coding of the character of Godzilla can be read as that of the nuclear bombs. Many Japanese films either deal with the aftermath of the war or simply moving forward. The filmmaker that I'm going to look at today is Hayao Miyazaki, more specifically his film Princess Mononoke and how the war impacted his storytelling and his longing for nature. Miyazaki's stories typically involve strong female characters, a morally ambiguous villain, the hubris of industrialization, and the magic of nature. The period that led to the war was a huge leap in manufacturing and the progress of industry. Miyazaki's last film, The Wind Rises, was about the chief designer of Japan's airplanes during the war and the rapid advancement of this industry. This rapid advancement did not stop after the war, however, and Miyazaki seemed to long for a return to nature in a post-industrial and post-war society. According to Michael Toscano, I only have an impressionistic grasp of it, but enough to report that it has something to do with what he sees as the false promises of Japan's post-war industrialization, the sedation of the Japanese people by consumption, the digitalization of Japanese imagination, and the hopelessness of a Japanese people who are uprooted from their own traditions, spirituality, and environment. Now, obvious Orientalism in that statement aside, Toscano makes a good point about modernity and the longing to return to a time of a more natural living. In the film Princess Mononoke, the main protagonist, Prince Ashitaka, gets a cursed right arm by stopping a boar god that was demonically possessed from destroying his village. The god is found out to have been corrupted by an iron bullet from a gun. Prince Ashitaka is banished from his home and must complete a journey to find out who shot the boar. The bullet, and later in the film Iron Town, is coded as industry, and the gods are coded as the old way of living, i.e. nature. Miyazaki's films are often hand-animated and feature beautiful natural landscapes. In the paper, Animated Nature, Aesthetics, Ethics, and the Empathy in Miyazaki Hayao's Eco-Philosophy, author Pamela Gossin points out, within the course of his own lifetime, rapid modernization in Japan has pushed nature to the limit. As he learned through his own reading on the subject, especially Clive Ponting's A Green History of the World, the pattern of human cultures inhabiting a geographical area new to them, developing technologically through the exploitation of that ecosystem's natural resources, and then ultimately exhausting the very environment that sustained their lives and their social development, is a sad and all too recurring motif throughout Earth's history. Landscapes are an important part of any visual medium, especially animation. Within the film, Prince Ashitaka visits forests, mountains, and valleys set in the mythical world that mirrors Sengoku period Japan. The Sengoku period, also known as the Warring States period, in Japanese history was a time of constant strife among the different daimyos or local lords. The backdrops of some locations in Princess Mononoke have the different factions fighting each other in the background, and at one point later in the film, Ashitaka comments that they should be sick of all the fighting. The war is portrayed throughout the film as seeming almost directionless, with nameless factions massacring a village indiscriminately. The areas that surround the war are bleak and in stark contrast to the other areas of the film that seem magical and thriving. Ironically, in the film, Ashitaka rescues a citizen of Irontown, and the wounded man is terrified of the forest, whereas Ashitaka, coming from a more rural village, seems to see the magic in the forest as welcoming. Outside of the forest, Ashitaka brings the man back to Irontown, where the sound of metal clanking and the smoke billows are visible in stark contrast to the beauty of the surrounding water and the forest. Interestingly, Miyazaki wrestles with moral complexity in his films as a result of the war. He tells a story that is set in the firebombing of his hometown that involves his family leaving behind their neighbors to escape. The memory made Miyazaki feel the duality of his parents, stating, "As a small child, you want to believe your parents are good people, the best in the world, so I suppressed this memory inside of me for a long time." Within the context of Princess Mononoke, Prince Ashitaka's right arm is cursed from his encounter with the boar god, and while he's trying to help people, his arm is trying to hurt them. This duality is also seen by the main antagonist, Lady Eboshi, the leader of Irontown. Lady Eboshi is a kind, caring, and maternal figure to not only the denizens of her village, but to a group of lepers that society has thrown out. All this contrasts with the destruction of the surrounding environment and her antagonistic actions towards the old god. The film tries to frame the conflicts within it as neither the act of a good or bad person, but rather the actions themselves are judged. The destruction of the forest is bad, but is Lady Eboshi evil for doing it? The answer is not an easy one, but she is framed as a caring leader. The greed is framed as evil, but the moral judgment of the character is up for interpretation. The conflicts are complex and intricate, as quoted in an article. Issues in Miyazaki's films range from environmental depletion, the horrors of war, then inequities under totalitarian regimes and between peoples, people's enslavement to commodity fetishism, to the setbacks entailed by personal development, the loss of innocence, and the cultivation of the values of loyalty, gratitude, courage, self-sacrifice, and love. Defines Miyazaki's worlds as challenging, spellbinding due to their simultaneous evocation of an elating sense of freedom and a harrowing vision of life's darker facets. The titular Princess Mononoke is also a strong-willed character. The adopted daughter of the wolf god Naga, she is empowering, commanding, and overall fiercely intelligent. In most of Miyazaki's films, the role of women is expanded to more than the stereotypical woman in distress. In fact, many of the women are more competent than the men. This might be in stark contrast with the hyper-masculine nature of World War II-era Japan. As Maria Teresa Trisciuzzi writes, "We have reached a time in which males' way of thinking is reaching a limit. Girls and women have more flexibility, and that is why a female's point of view is more fitting to the current time." Within the film, Prince Ashitaka and Princess Mononoke join forces to stop Lady Eboshi from killing the forest spirit. The forest spirit is the leader of all of the old gods, and is said throughout the film that if you have the forest spirit's head, you will become immortal. Jigo, another character that Ashitaka meets in his travels, teams up with Lady Eboshi to cut off the forest spirit's head and give it to the Emperor. The character of Jigo is motivated solely on greed, as the Emperor has claimed that whoever gives him the head will receive the riches of the land. This character's motivations are seen as evil, even though he was an endearing character before this point, further adding to the moral complexity of the film. Many of the evil actions of the characters are framed in their own personal greed and their blatant disrespect for the natural world around them. The need to modernize is in stark opposition to the natural/magical world. Many of Miyazaki's films rely on Shintoism. Princess Mononoke is no exception. The belief that everything has a spirit in it is ever present in the film. The scene from earlier in the forest highlights this by having tree spirits come out and greet Ashitaka on his way to Irontown. Shintoism is used here in contrast to the idea of modernity. To modernize is to forsake the natural world while also exploiting it. As Lucy Wright and Jerry Clode wrote, conceptualizing continuity between man and nature, Shinto views humankind in harmonious accord with the wider ecosystem. Many of Miyazaki's films address the consequences of upsetting this balance, either through wholesale destruction of the natural environment, as in Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, or via the inevitable separation of spheres born of urbanization and modernity, Spirited Away. In the end of the film, Prince Ashitaka and Princess Mononoke rescue the forest spirit, who then leaves while restoring the surrounding countryside to a more natural state. This leaving of the old gods is signifying the end of a magical era within this world, and the beginning of a new era, the era of man. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry it took so long to upload this video. A lot of university stuff has been going on, but if you like this video, why don't you go ahead and subscribe, and also if you'd like to support me, why don't you go ahead and head on over to my Patreon. Links in the description, and all the citations for this video are linked in the description as well. If you'd like to view some more of Lindsay Ellis's videos, I have her link in the description, and follow me on Twitter and I can tell you how awful capitalism is. Bye.